Welcome to the reflections session of TRT World Forum 2021. I am Elif Bereketli, anchor of TRT World's International Arts and Culture Program Showcase. I hope you've been enjoying the forum so far. This year's title is Power and Paradox, Understanding Grand Strategy in the 21st Century. Now, we'll take the strategy discussion further with this next session called Cultural Management in the Digital Age. The digital age is most definitely upon us. With its influence pervading our everyday lives, technology has also conquered the way we experience, create, and manage arts and culture. Especially after COVID-19, art available to anyone having access to just a computer and internet has immensely increased. With the rise of NFTs, it wouldn't be wrong to say that a fundamental shift operated that is reshaping the world of digital art. Are the recent digital developments in the world of art the future of the art market, as some have claimed, or are they just another here today, gone tomorrow speculative phenomenon? To discuss these and more, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel of esteemed speakers. Schachter is an artist, art dealer, and writer, but also a curator of contemporary art exhibitions at museums and galleries. He's also a lecturer of art history and economics. Along with these different hats, his writing appears in various international publications. Dyer is an arts influencer. Being an arts influencer is a passion project for him with a mission to make art accessible to everyone. Dyer is a director of marketing at Myseum of Toronto. Before his role at the Myseum, he served in different communication roles with the Canadian federal government. A warm welcome to you all. Now, Josh, if I can begin with you, I want to ask a wider question at first, then we will, of course, all of us go deeper in the context later. How would you describe the effect of the digital age on the art world? Is digitalization revolutionizing the art world, or is it too much to say, you think?
I think it's fair to say that a revolution of some sorts is among us. I think it's doing an incredible job of creating a certain level of accessibility in the arts world, a certain level of inclusivity in the arts world, and sort of diversifying those who can participate in the arts world. Things that are going to become crucial for survival of many arts institutions. So I think we're looking at something that's important and probably here to stay.
Okay, so as I was thinking about this panel, the question that popped up for me was, is it even possible to talk about digitalization versus anything in the art world anymore? Because I feel like, digital influence is everywhere. It's just, very hard to differentiate it now. So maybe I want to turn to you, Kenny, now. Do these categories, you think, exist? Or are we just past beyond that point where everything is a bit digital and everything that is not digital has a little bit of that influence?
Well, I mean, it's hard to pigeonhole everything into neat little categories. Definitely NFTs, which is nothing more than a kind of digital certificate of authenticity, a way to introduce scarcity to digital works, and as a result to market them and enter them into a marketplace. So that has been a radical transformation in the history of art so far. It also serves to accessorize and democratize accessibility for people to introduce their work into the marketplace and gain an audience. So how does it affect, if you're a painter or a sculptor in a traditional sense, the impact is very little. If you're someone who employs new technology, then your life has been turned absolutely nothing short of upside down.
And how about for the audiences?
Well, crypto world, what the traditional art world fails to understand is that this is a kind of like a renaissance. I've never seen it. I've been in the art world for more than 3 decades, and I've never seen a situation where not just, I mean, there's been more growth in the art world as we know it in the past 25 years than the previous 250 years. In the past year, that that's exponent. Like it's been nothing. Like it's been an explosion because the whole crypto digital universe has entered their approximation of a new art world. So the audience is now like a virus. It's not just an increase of an audience. It's a new universe of makers, consumers, and everything in between, writers, admirers, observers, collectors. So there's a parallel world, and these two worlds are colliding as we speak.
Okay, two worlds are colliding. That's an interesting point. We'll definitely delve deeper into that. And now, Benny, how disruptive do you think digitalization has been on the art market so far as an arts influencer yourself?
It's kind of interesting because from an influencer point of view, most of my work is on Instagram, and I think the Twitterverse is actually really where the NFT market lives. And so from my standpoint, I've been kind of watching and kind of becoming more and more engaged in it. But in terms of the market, it's very hard to tell. I think Kenny probably is a better person to ask this question because in terms of understanding the market, I'm still learning about that personally from an influencer's point of view.
Okay, so let's talk about what you're doing, Benny, so that we can talk about your perspective and how technology and digitalization has affected the art world.
Sure. So I think for me, I started influencing, quote unquote, because I personally was interested in art, but I couldn't find my own entry point into it. It felt out of reach. And so what I started doing was, creating a world in which I could start sharing and talking about art from my own perspectives, right? And so what I think digital has given me is a microphone in which I can bring other people into the world of art. And I think that's an example of how in the larger picture, institutions and art galleries and artists themselves can begin to also have these conversations. And that's where I see personally where technology really lends itself to the changing and the growth of the art community and the art world.
And were you part of the art world, or what was your relationship to art before you became, quote unquote, an influencer?
Right, exactly. Actually, I never studied art myself personally. My background is in architecture, and then ultimately evolved into production design and creative direction for live entertainment. And so again, I think what makes my personal approach interesting is that, I don't come from that art education, and I don't come from an art history background, and I don't still fully understand the art business side of things. And so what I do present is a much more authentic, sort of visceral approach to talking about art. And I think that's why I've been successful in that. I think people are able to feel like they're able to be part of my conversation rather than feel like they're kind of ostracized by the kind of more academic approach to talking about art.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the academic approach, I think for a lot of people, what you call the academic approach is just inaccessible and intimidating. And that it was the rep that a lot of museums and art institutions and arts and culture people had really, or still have. So I wonder if that's what you thought of the art world before being an active part of it.
Absolutely. I think, even today I go to museums and there's days where I have to look up words because I have no idea, what they're saying. And so, what I do, and then especially as I'm creating content and when I'm writing, it really is about focusing back on, who am I communicating with, right? What are the words that I'm using, and when does it become pretentious, and how can I actually begin to talk to people with the power that the work that I'm trying to showcase has, right? So that goes beyond just also language. I think it has to do with photography, down to color balancing and perspectives. It really is compared to, I guess, more traditional journalism, a different approach to communicating.
Mm-hmm. And Josh, as you're on the museum side of this dynamic, Why do you think the art world had this repetition of being, inaccessible and intimidating again? And what was done wrong? And do you feel like it is changing?
I mean, it definitely is changing. Um, to be honest, I might not even be the right person to ask sort of why it was built this way, because much like Benny, I also don't come from the art world. It's something that has always interested me. But I came to it, but trying to overcome some of the same barriers that Benny has mentioned. Um, and so why it has been built this way, uh, I can't exactly tell you, but is it changing? I think it certainly is.
Okay, sorry to
Um,
cut you off there, Josh. I'm not really asking why it's built that way, because that's a very, very huge topic. That's really not our focus here. But I'm more asking about the communication side of it. What do you think the museums in general were doing wrong in their communication style and in their ways of communication? That's more like my focus here.
oh, yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, again, going back to what Benny had already brought up, in saying, you enter these spaces, and often it seems like they're speaking a different language, which is something that many people call art speak. The introductory panels to many of um, the exhibits, the descriptions, the labels next to many of the works, they're written in a way that a lot of people can't even sort of navigate. And so there's a whole language that's been built to talk about these things that becomes intimidating. Um, the and also, I think it also comes down to the stories that many of these galleries, museums, and institutions tell. There's certain narratives that they've spent a lot of time exploring that a lot of people from many different diverse backgrounds don't necessarily um, aren't exactly relevant to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we see a lot of this changing. Specifically what we're doing here at Myseum of Toronto is really trying to diversify the city's historical narrative by having a lot more representation in our museum and the stories we tell.
Okay, so Kenny, now I want to include you a little bit more into this accessibility conversation. So first of all, I wonder if you agree that contemporary art was intimidating and inaccessible before social media communications.
Just to add to the conversation, I'm self-taught as well, and I never came up within the ranks of the art world. The first art class I was in, I was teaching. So the question is exactly, how is the art world? I mean, to participate in any universe, whether you're an engineer, a stamp collector, trading derivatives for Goldman Sachs, there's a degree of expertise involved. And I think I entered the art world, let's say I clawed my way into it over decades, but I got in more or less, probably less than more.
Yes, you did.
So
Yeah.
it's a matter of passion. I love art. That's it. So I think what's different today in terms of the crypto world, the people that I'm finding in the NFT community are not only are they not aware of the parameters or the constructs of the fine art world as we know it, the traditional art world, for lack of a better term, they're not interested. They have no desire to enter this context. So either the art world learns a new language, the technology language, and learns how to participate on the terms of this new digital universe, or it doesn't. And the digital world, like I said, like some of the biggest galleries in the world, internationally speaking, galleries like Hauser and Wirth, Larry Gagosian has 18 galleries across 18 universes, and David Zwirner. The people in the crypto or digital NFT community, they couldn't care less who these people are. They couldn't care less who the big names of this art world are as we knew it a year or two ago. So if the art world wants to participate, there's $2 trillion of market cap in Bitcoin alone. And you could ignore it, you could be cynical about it, you could dismiss it. But the art world responds to one thing, and it's money. So once you see the auction houses, which have been the most agile and kind of innovative in this space, because they don't have this pretentious, the art market has one power, the galleries, and that's controlling accessibility, who gets to play, who gets to even buy stuff, participate. And NFT world does not care. If you buy stuff, it's relatively anonymous on big marketplaces like OpenSea or some of the bigger NFT platforms. So I think that really there's been a fundamental tectonic shift in the way that we access information, art, and consume it. So the art world is going to learn to play or they're going to become irrelevant. And I think there's one thing the art world understands, like I said before, and it's the clinging, clanging of a cash register. So from what I see and this vantage point, I happened to be in Toronto going to a museum exhibition for an artist, Matthew Wong, at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And look, I love art. So whatever, I've been making digital art since the 90s, long before NFTs. And I don't differentiate. I just between the medium. So if the art world wants a piece of this new action and that's what it is, then they're going to learn to participate. And museums, if you bill yourself as a contemporary museum, I mean, contemporary art reflects the socioeconomic, political, cultural aspects of our time. Technology is as much a cultural phenomenon as a technological phenomenon. Artificial intelligence, robotics, all of these things are at the disposal of artists to incorporate into their work. So it's incumbent upon museums to embrace this work and look, there are artists in the 60s and 70s that made largely non-materialist work, like videotapes that become obsolete, that need nurturing and caring and how to preserve them and, keep them up to date so they can continue to be experienced and enjoyed by, subsequent generations. And every museum, like every museum of modern art from here across the globe, will need to adapt. And the art world needs to adapt. And if you don't want to adapt, look, you can't force anyone to do anything. But this is really changing the way that, people can take things, empower artists to. Social media was a radical departure. When I started, you would need to take a small photographic slide, and the only way you could communicate an image from one person to another was with a little photographic slide, unless you had more money and you could afford a big photographic representation. Then you would stick it in what's called an envelope with a postage stamp, and you would send it to another person. Then all of a sudden, the advent of Instagram in particular was like a wrecking ball, a democratic wrecking ball that blurred all of these geographical distinctions and permitted people. I have found so many wonderful, beautiful artists from all over the world that I have incorporated into my curatorial work from every continent. And this absolutely would be impossible were it not for Instagram. So you have this power that was being instilled into artists across the globe to be able to convey their image and communicate. Art is about not just expression, but it's a means of communication. So artists were communicating their images, but they couldn't really make money from it. And then NFTs just came along about 2 years ago, and the market has only taken root over the past year. And now this has been like the second fork in social media, in internet. So it's really like a new internet, and Ethereum, which is what NFTs are mostly based on, is the second break. The first break away from the traditional modes of doing business in art is social media, and break number 2 is a place for. I have helped by spoon feeding information how to get a MetaMask wallet, how to introduce your work into the format of NFTs. I have helped literally hundreds and hundreds of people make a living. I love to facilitate opportunities for other people. It gives me an enormous amount of pleasure and satisfaction to be able to let people, make a living from the things that they love. Why shouldn't they? And like I said, I've been firmly entrenched, for better or worse, into this old art world as an old person. Anyway, so
But can I please cut you off there? Because I'm really curious to find out whether you think that we should actually be careful about this very, just like you said, a tectonic transformation happening in the art world. I mean, what are the possible risks, for example, with the world of NFTs, for example?
Look, there's a Bell's curve of morality and integrity in the world. Whenever there's large sums of money popping up, there's going to be bad behavior. That's called greed and human nature. So it's not endemic to NFTs or anything else. If there's money involved, there's going to be a bunch of ASSHOLES. I don't want to get. So look, I launched a big NFT project myself last month, and there were copies before it even finished coming out. That's just, you can't stop that. So there's going to look, there's danger to the environment, but the mining community needs to address that. There's always going to be dangers, problems, issues, but no one ever talked about the environmental footprint of a shipping crate that gets sent to an art fair, or people getting on an airplane to go see an art fair. All of a sudden, people will always look for a way to dismiss something. Human nature has a hard time accepting change. So this is a change. This is a big change. So either you get with the change and learn what the language is and how this is how it works, but a lot of people reject that, and their defense mechanism is to push back and to talk badly about something for lack of appreciation, understanding, or the desire to know.
Okay, well, I do agree with you that there are a lot to say about the opportunities for positive change through digitalization in the art world. But, I really want to play the devil's advocate at this point, and we don't have much time left. So maybe I'll turn to Josh now. What do you think we should be careful about during these very transformative times?
I mean, with regards to things like NFTs, Kenny's certainly right in terms of there's a huge opportunity there. There's a lot of money there. But I think, what still scares a lot of the institutions and a lot of the folks in the art world is the inherent volatility that we still see. I don't know how, it's really, sort of this moral dilemma of whether the sort of the pros outweigh the cons, because there's an incredible opportunity in terms of how that technology allows artists to control their work and have sort of royalties they can collect in perpetuity. Phrases like starving artists don't come from nowhere; they come from artists being for generations sort of underpaid from their work. But what I will say is, for myself and my line of work, I see museums most specifically as educational institutions. And so when I look at this digital era and how it's impacting the art world, what I'm most interested in is how we can use these technologies to engage more people in the art world. And so far, I think things like social media have done an incredible job of this, and that's for me the most important. And I don't see any downside in having sort of an art world that is sort of more diverse, more inclusive, and more accessible to folks. And so I think we can continue using these tools. I mean, it's also a matter of relevance for museums. There's been I think it's getting a little bit better, but even just not so long ago, they're having a huge issue in terms of like an age gap and being able to appear relevant to younger audiences. That means you have to be on things like TikTok. If you're seeing a major gap and you're not able to attract a certain generation of folks, and the generation that have been sort of your donors and stakeholders for so long are literally dying off, you have to find new ways to engage with people. And these social media platforms have provided an incredible opportunity there.
Okay, well, Benny, what do you think are the challenges?
Personally, from an influencer's perspective, I think a challenge that I've seen is falling into like the Instagram trap. There's a lot of like very pretty, very enticing, visually stimulating images and videos out there on social media. And oftentimes they tend to get a lot of attention and traction, and people line up around the block to go see these things. But a lot of times they're photo ops, and I think one thing that I would say is that a risk and a trap that I try to avoid, even as when I choose things to cover is really looking at the integrity of the work, right? Like being able to see through the pretty images and the sort of facades that some of these things are, and be like, is this good art, and is this just an opportunity for me to create more content for my post, and I think that especially as I'm looking at NFTs is something that I'm holding close to me. It's like, what is it at the end of the day, and how is this moving anything forward? And if it's not, then then you really have to ask yourself, is this art that I'm wanting to invest my time or money into?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it must be a challenge to measure success, I guess, in the digital world, which is obviously just a world of numbers.
Absolutely. I mean, especially when it comes to social media, right? Like I have my algorithm, my math, my numbers of like comments and likes, but how many people can I actually, concretely say have I influenced to go see more art, right? Or how many people have I actually driven to a show? These numbers are kind of impossible to count almost. But personally, and I think that's where the passion of being quote unquote influencer comes in, is that in those moments when someone tells me that they planned their trip around my Instagram posts, or that they bought tickets immediately when they saw this writing that I did, that I think for me is what drives me as an influencer, right? Like what is my goal as an influencer? But it is to influence people to have their own engagement with the art world. And so to answer your question, yes, it's quite difficult, but it doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And Kenny, now I want to risk annoying you, I have to say, because I want to, flip the coin for a second and maybe just talk about whether it is a great thing that art is more accessible and it's very easily accessible. Now, maybe some people say that it is perhaps a good thing that you have to make an actual effort to reach something so that, it doesn't lose its value. As for one last point, what would you say about this perhaps unpopular opinion in this panel and perhaps an annoying point for you?
I don't think it's annoying. I just think it's silly and misguided.
Okay.
Art is about communication. Art helps people. There's been clinical studies done in hospitals, even at Harvard, where having patients exposed to art in hospitals reduces hospital stays and the levels of medication required. Art is not for the few. Art is not for rich people. Art is not, art is meant to, an artist makes art to be seen. Art is meant to communicate. Art is bringing us together from all corners of the globe, even in this discussion right now. You look at the terrible problems we're facing in the world, politically, economically, socially. Art is something ameliorative. Art is something that could bring about peace, art, happiness, joyfulness. Art transforms people's lives. I'm beginning to sound like Jeff Koons in his worst, most therapy ways, but there's nothing wrong with making art. I'm not saying to dumb it down. I'm saying to make it, if someone wants to see it, experience it, why fight? Why build a barrier around something that is an expression of human creativity? Why that's, these hierarchies, that annoys me, not your comment. It annoys me when if someone walks into a gallery, they get pigeonholed, looked at up and down, and judged because of what they appear to be rather than who they are. So my theory is that make art easy for people. Stop, people get scared and they reject something that makes them uncomfortable. Don't make art uncomfortable anymore. And if digital art is a way for people to see it and have a relationship to it, fantastic. And art is economically turned around the lives today in the more than ever, and that's an extraordinary thing. I'm putting my hands up like an emoji.
Okay. Please, Josh,
I
please.
would say just one thing based on the last things that both Kenny and Benny shared, which is also just, Benny mentioned, does his posts actually, influence people to go into a museum? I would question, is that even important? If your post, if you're sort of, analyzing a piece of artwork and that causes somebody on their Instagram feed to stop in their tracks and, think about that artwork in some way, notice it, feel it in some way. Does it matter whether they actually ever made it into the gallery itself? And I think that's really, that's really the most revolutionary piece of how we're able to share all these works so broadly across the world so quickly. And I would just question whether it matters if you actually make it into the exhibit, if you've actually had a chance to think about it and feel it and reflect on it.
Well, it's very
True, but I do want to.
unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. Please, okay, just for one last
No,
sentence because we're almost out of time now.
no, I was just saying that yes, I think that, and that's my strict strategy in some ways, right? Make them feel something in their home on their phones, and then maybe that will get them to really go out. Because I think maybe it's not necessarily a trap, but I think that we've learned over the pandemic that seeing art digitally is, maybe not for NFT art, but in terms of paintings and sculpture, you really need to go be experiencing it in physical form and feel the chemistry of matter.
True.
Okay. Well, it's very unfortunate that we're out of time because these are really interesting comments that I would like to talk more about. But maybe next time, Kenny Schachter, Benny Orr, and Josh Dyer. It was lovely having you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all who've tuned into this session. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks a lot for watching.